Hello, everyone. Welcome to a new edition of Low-Code Cafe, episode 87. Today, Patrick will show us how to build a dashboard because many times we have data in many different systems, but of course, building actionable dashboards, it's an important system to make sense of the data and take the right decisions. So that will be an interesting topics, but before we dig into it, let me welcome the new people in this webinar and give you a brief presentation. My name is Bogdan Litescu. I'm the founder and CEO of Plantanet. And this event is something that we do every Wednesday at the same time. It's a community event where we get together to discuss interesting topics, interesting techniques, implement systems, discover hot topics that happen inside the communities, on the forums and in the help center. And sometimes we even have external guest speakers. So if you have something cool to show, reach out to us and we'll be glad to host you. This event, as you noticed, is being recorded, and then all past editions are on our YouTube channel. And we use them for training a lot because you'll find things in there from implementing dashboards like we are doing today, but also integrating with mobile application, low-code platforms, and JavaScript libraries, and tons of other stuff. It's 86 hours of interesting content in there. Cool. So the agenda for today, I will give you just a brief update on the product release. And then we'll hear stories from the trenches with Dale Warner, our head of support. And finally, Patrick Anderson, who is a technical success manager at Plantanet, will show us how to build a dashboard and integrate into other systems. Cool. So let's get started. Just a brief update from me. We've announced 120 for some time. We were supposed to release it today, but we are postponing the release for next week. We are aiming for Monday. The major reason why we postponed it was the feedback that we received from the community. It was very good feedback. We uncovered lots of issues, and we want to focus, of course, to make a quality release. So we decided to postpone until we sorted this feedback as well. So big shout out goes to our community in the beta program for helping us make this a solid release. So starting next week, we'll of course start working on the 121, which I'll speak more about next week, but basically it will be the multi-environment and deployment feature. Oh, so if there are no questions, I would like to pass it to Dale to give us some interesting stories.
All right, good morning. Let me find that spot in the presentation here. In my spot. Okay, so from the trenches, we had the new hotfix released this week. So previously on version 1.19, we've had 9 hotfixes released. These are important things that impact some or all of you, depending on the individual hotfix. This week, we released one that is a bug fix in the form builder where the tag's input field couldn't be disabled. That was important for a project that was being built, and we were able to deliver that one. And in a moment, I'll show tags input field in case you haven't happened to use it before. Couple of programming notes. This week in Low-Code Cafe, we're talking about this add a dashboard feature. I'll be continuing that next week in part 2, and we'll be adding chart.js. At least that's the plan. So if you like this week, there'll be more next week. Every week we do Fridays this same hour. We do Campfire. So this is just a community get-together where we talk in a more meeting-like format. And this week, we know at least one topic in advance is going to be the multi-portal discussion. And both Bogdan and I will be hosting that particular one. While we're doing this, I'm going to put the links on our chat. variety of links, but let's get that out. You can register in advance for the Low-Code Campfire. We have all of our recordings. So the recordings link is there to YouTube. Our community portal, if you're not participating, it's a great place to learn and to help your fellow low-code enthusiasts. We have a feedback form on there that's for this particular, for Low-Code Cafe. You can tell us what you liked, what you didn't like. And then this week in Patrick's presentation, he's going to talk about JWT security access. It's going to be part of what he's putting together. So there's a video, an 8-minute video that describes how to do that. And so that's on the chat board as well. And then we're talking a little bit about product retirement. And so Chad Weiss, you can contact him for more information as well. So with that, our DNN Sharp product retreat, which we began back in August, is complete. That ended on March 31st. It doesn't impact Plantain App. If you're using Plantain App, this doesn't apply to you, but it does impact all of our individual modules that we sold in the previous decade, except Action Form, Search Boost, and their related add-ons. So support for those products will continue just as it was, but it's going to be limited to how-to and advice. The last module version that we published for that version 5.19 is the end of new software for those products. And so for the impacted products, watch for an email from us that's going to include special upgrade discounts, or you can contact Chad directly if you're using the DNN Sharp tools like Action Grid or My Tokens. I wanted to mention, let's see, so tags input. I've created I'm just going to demonstrate this real quickly. We have a form that's been added to a page. I haven't configured it at all yet. So this is just an opportunity to show you tags input. We'll start with a blank form. I always like to name my forms. So we'll call this the I am going to add a tags input field to the form and we'll configure it. So this, let's say we wanted to if our goal was to allow the form user to input up to 5 users from our system users table. So this would be why we're going to use tags input. So call this the user selected tags input. And instead of using, we have a variety of data sources as we do with other pickers, and we're going to use a SQL query data source. And so we'll select, we're going to use the user name, text. You can have text and values for this, much like other selection, like other drop downs, things like that. So we're going to have username as text from users. So that will, this is going to control what's going to be displayed in this. And we want to allow them to do up to 5 people, but no more. So they can pick out their 5 favorite users, for example. I'm also going to add a button that will display what's going on. So we'll have a submit button. And the only action that I'm going to do, and I do this pretty often when I'm testing, we're going to display an error message. And the error message is I'm just going to append all the fields. So whatever was selected when they push the button, it's just going to show up on the screen and we can see it. And so it's a nice interactive display. That's it. We've configured tags input and we're going to see what it does. So we'll go back to the screen. So when this loads up, we click on it and now it's a drop down of all of our users. And so we can pick users, for example, by clicking on them. We can type So like if we wanted test A as a user and test B as a user and test C as a user, it's letting us pick, and we'll also do test 1. And see, now we can't do any more because we said we only could get our 5 favorite users. So these show up as tags in the box. You can click X to delete one. That's part of what the tags input feature will let you do. When you submit, we can see the values. That's since we only provided a text, the values are each of the values separated by commas. So I'm going to do one more just modification to that just to kind of close the loop. If we go to users, change our data source, and we'll also add user ID as value. And these are listed down here in the help text. We have a value column and a text column. So username will be what's shown publicly. Username will be shown publicly as the text. User ID will be the value. And so when we save and refresh this form, we can do the same thing. And we'll pick out a couple of users and submit. And now we see we have user IDs shown 29 and 30. We can delete the first one, and now it just shows 30. So it produces a comma delimited list of whatever your tag values are if you provide values, or text if you provide text. Tags input demo. Hope that that's of use if you haven't used it before. I hope that's helpful. Last thing I'll mention is that I put the link on the clipboard for JWT security access, and that's that 8-minute video. This is what you're going to see. It's on our YouTube channel, and it just goes through very quickly and explains how to use how to access a DNN system and our APIs. Particularly, it lets you sign in and act as if you are a user. So that's a key concept to what Patrick is going to present. And with that, I am going to pass it. I'm going to invite Patrick to pop on here and show us what he's got planned for dashboard today.
Thank you. So today we are going a little bit, first of all, you can see my screen, right?
Yep.
Okay, so we're going to go a little bit Low-Code Cafe retro on you. If those of you who have been with us for a while remember that we used to, start building a solution and take it over a few episodes. And that's what we're going to start today. So we're starting simple. We're going to start just using dashboard tiles, and as Dale mentioned earlier, we're going to progress that along, and you'll see this. And this is something that probably eventually we'll actually start using as in our infrastructure here, but we're going to just start simple here and see where it goes. So you can see I'm starting with a completely blank new configuration, new Plantain app instance. The only thing I've done here that I will get to a little bit later is I've put 2 tokens on the system that I didn't want to do during the webinar, and I'll explain that when I get to it. But that's all that's been done to the system so far is 2 tokens. So I'm going to go to configuration and entities. And so we're going to start, what the goal is today is that we want to pull in some basic statistics about questions that have been posted on the community website. So we're going to be accessing the API of the community website, community.plantanapp.com. So first, what I want to do here is, so planning ahead, and I'm going to just choose default namespaces today, but maybe we'll give those, we'll assign those namespaces later to our entities and workflows, but that can be done afterwards. So planning ahead, eventually what we want this to do is access more than just community, but maybe some of our other sites too. So I'm going to add an entity for the system. So that's going to be whatever system we're getting data from is the idea here. So I'm going to just leave that everything else the way it is for now and click continue. And the only property I'm going to have here for now is just name. And of course, as you know, we can come back later if we decide there's got to be more data here with something we can change later. But and our display name is going to be name, and I will save that. So then the next one I want to do is access system entities. So I'm going to add another entity here, and we're going to call that system entity. And we'll go ahead and put that underneath the system one that I just created. And continue. And we're going to have connection to system. So add property here and connect that to the entity I just created. And then the entity name. And let me just correct my spelling there on that. And that'll just be text. So the idea is that we'll be pulling data from specific entities on the system that we're getting data from. Okay, and then our display name here will be the entity name, and I'm going to save that the way it is. And then the next thing I want to create is a statistic entity. So I'm going to just create that. And this is going to be, so today we're going to be focusing mostly on just a daily statistic, and we'll see that later. But the idea is that later we may want to save different statistics to the to our table. So so I'm just going to create this, and we're only going to put one statistic in it now. But the idea is that we're trying to prepare for growth on this. And here is the same as the entity. I'm just going to have a name property. Save that. Oh, I need to specify display name. There we go. Save that. And now I'm going to create another entity called community stats. So this is where we're going to store the statistics that we're pulling from the community website. And I'm going to call that community stat. And I'm going to go ahead and leave that as a top level. Okay, and go ahead and go to properties. And here, we're going to pull in a few additional things. So let me just put these in here, and then we'll specify. And we're going to get a value. And we're going to collect a property called as of. So I'll do the data type on that first. We're going to make that a date. We're going to, there's going to be one statistic per day collected. So that's why we're adding this in here instead of just using the created date. Value is just going to be an integer. And the statistic is going to be connected to our statistics entity that I created just a minute ago. And then, of course, the entity is going to be connected to the system entity, entity that I just created a minute ago. And then we'll make our, the display name, we'll use the value for the display name. Okay, so let me save that. And
lots
now,
of infrastructure covered. Now we get to start seeing what it looks like.
Yeah. So the first thing I want to do, so let me go to the home page here, and I'm just going to refresh this. And you can see we have some other things in here. So now the first thing I'm going to do is add a system. Let me just let that load there. And I could just call it community, but I'll put in the full URL of the site and add that in. Okay. Now I'm going to go to system entities and click new here, and I'm going to specify that this is an entity on the community platform, and the entity is going to be questions. Add that in, and I'm just going to put this in here so that you can see where we're headed. I don't think we'll get to this today, but then also I'm going to add another one called feature requests, and we can keep on building on this.
That's the entity name, right?
Oh, yep, thank you. And that is on the community platform. Okay.
So the idea is we can collect information on different types of things from community.
Yep, exactly. Okay, so now let's head over to the community stats. Okay, so I've added the community as a system, and we have questions, and we have some, let me make sure. Nope, I didn't put a statistic in. We'll need that before we start adding things in. So I'm going to put in a daily statistic. And once again, not sure we'll get to it today, but just to show you the idea of where we're headed, I'll put in a weekly option here too. Okay. All right, so now let me go to community stats, and I'm just going to add a few records here. Now, the idea right now is what I'm doing is just putting in some data in so we have it to play with. But ultimately, this is going to be, the records here are going to be automatically populated when we start accessing the data via an API. So I'm going to put 2, and I'll just go back to, let's say, Saturday, and add that, click new. I'm just going to put a few in here. And we'll do Sunday there. And let's say for some reason Sunday was a busy day. Nope, Monday's a busy day. We're gonna make Sunday's just 4. Let's see, yeah, that's right. Monday's a busy day, right? Yeah. So we're gonna make Monday a busy day. And there we go. Add, so I have 4, 2, 3, and 4, and let's do and we'll do 10, and that'll be Tuesday, and then we'll do one for today. Okay, so we have a little bit of data in the system now, and oh, I can see one thing I forgot already that I missed is that I intended to create the community stats listing with a dashboard. I can add a dashboard module on here, but I wanted to just make sure in case anybody wasn't aware. Actually, let me just go back and do that because I want to do it the way we intended. So I'm going to go to the community stat entity, and I'm going to edit it, and I'm going to tell it to include a dashboard, and we will save that. And I'll do an override to update the assets that are created by the entity builder. Let's go back over here and refresh this page. So now we have a dashboard module.
That's a great demonstration for anybody who has an entity and wants to add a dashboard. You just turn that on, and there it goes.
Yep, and it's there for you to configure. So I was saying a minute ago I could put the page into edit and add the module, but that was probably a lot faster doing it that way. Okay, so now I want to just configure a few modules here. So I made a few dashboard tiles. So the first one I'm going to do, I'm going to make this, I'm going to call this questions, and it's going to be I'll go ahead and no, because the title will have this the word today in it already, but the idea here is that we're going to look at questions just for today. So I'm going to get something kind of green here, apply that. I'm going to put a refresh interval in here. We'll see why a little bit later. I'm going to be accessing the data sources entities, and I'm going to be accessing the community stat entity. And I'm going to put a filter on here. So the filter, I'm just going to copy and paste in here to speed things up just a little bit. So I know that my community
Question
that
entity.
the is the first one, and I know that the statistic, the daily statistic that I want is record ID 1 in the statistic. So that's why I have 1 in both of those. So then moving along, I'm going to do a sum, and for aggregate property, I'm going to be accessing the value. So that's the value property of my community stat listing. And for the interval, I'm going to be just looking at today. So I'm going to choose the today interval, and the aggregate interval is going to be based on the property I mentioned earlier, the as of. And of course, this is going to be pulling back just a number, so I'm going to choose integer number as the formatter. So we have
questions for today.
Yep. So this is basically we're setting up how many questions we're going to have for today. So let me go ahead and save this. And so you can see that for April 6th, we have 4 questions, and now I have my tile saying 4. Okay. So let me configure another one here. This one, I'm going to actually just call this, I'm going to label this questions also. And I'll explain this a little bit in just a second. Well, I'll go ahead and just mention it now so I don't forget. But the idea here is I'm going to call this questions. Eventually, what we want is, so if I pull in feature requests as well, then I'll add more tiles, and then I'll be titling those as feature requests. So we're going to look at questions today, and now we're going to look at questions for the last 7 days. So let me just choose a different color here. I'll go something a little blue, apply that. And once again, I'm going to put a refresh interval in here. We're going to entities. Same thing, we're going to the community stat entity. And we are going to put the same filter in here. And we're going to do a sum again. And we're looking at the value property. And our aggregate interval this time is going to be just the last 7 days. And once again, we're basing that on the as of date. And you'll see later that we're going to work this out so that we only have 1 stat record per day for any given date. So then that's going to be an integer number. Okay, so now we have a setup that we're going to see questions for the last 7 days. So let me save that. And you can see here that it summed up the values that we have, because we only have 5 days. Okay, let me configure one more here.
And while he's doing that, I'm just going to mention that if you happen to see it, he used the Windows V clipboard, which is very cool. If you're not using it, get your last X number of pastes. So you can just Windows V and paste.
And, I could probably, there's all kinds of options for choosing colors here, but I'm just trying to make them, make each card look different is all I'm going for now. Oh, and I wanted to touch on the icon. So I'm keeping the question mark icon, the default one for all these, because the entity is questions. But if I were to add feature request tiles on here, I then would start choosing a different icon. But for now, I'm just going to keep the icon as the question mark for each of these. In different situations, you might want to have a different icon on each card, but that's where I'm going here. So entities. And the community stat entity, we're going to keep the same, oh, actually, no, this time, so we're doing average questions per day. So I'm going to choose the average aggregate function here. And we're once again going on the, we're going to average the values over the last 7 days. So of course, my aggregate interval is going to be last 7 days. And then the aggregate interval is going to be based on the as of date. And we're going to look at the integer number for, that's the formatter for what we're pulling back here.
Since it's an average, could we pick a decimal number if we wanted to?
Yeah.
A fraction.
Curiosity. Yeah, we can try that. Yep. Sounds good. You're putting a wrench in the plans here. Just kidding. Okay, so let me save that one. Okay, yep, and that turned out great. Okay, so then, and then the final one I want to configure here, and I promise it's going to get more interesting. So for those of you who are really familiar with dashboards, at this point you're probably thinking, well, I've done all this, but so now I'm going to do just look at the most questions in the day over the past 7 days. So put that in there, and I'm going to once again go for contrast here, apply that, and put my refresh interval in here, and community stat. And we're going to, for our aggregate function, choose maximum and look at the value. And we're going to look at the last 7 days. And we're looking at the as of, and our formatter will be an integer number. Okay, save that. And so Monday was the busiest day. So that's what we're seeing over the last 7 days, most questions in a day. Okay, so we have some tiles configured. So now, now that I've done this and we've seen that our data is loading our dashboard tiles nicely, now what I want to do is I'm going to do a little bit of setup on the source site. And actually, I've done it already, so I really just want to show you what I've done on the source site. So of course, the source site is community.plantinep.com, and I've already gone in here and I've loaded APIs, and I'm taking a look at the JWT API that's created. So this is how from the new site Health Check, we're going to get our token to be allowed to access the data from the community website. So let me just show you a little bit what's in here. We're passing in a username and password. We are accessing the API to and passing the username and password to that, and it's giving us back a token in JSON format, and we're parsing that and pulling out the token from there, and then the API is sending back the token that can be used to access the data. So this token has a limited lifespan. I think it's 60 minutes. Is that right, Dale?
I don't know.
Okay, I think it's a.
Point is, for somebody who's building a dashboard, you'd have to deal with the security that's on your source system, regardless. If it happens to be a PlantinApp system, you can use this, but there's a variety of security methods that are available on an API, and that's really up to the source system. But we're using JWT. So
that's the API for getting the token back to access the data. The other thing I did is let me go. Cancel this and load APIs again, is I took the standard get all questions API that it gets created when you create an entity, and I to make life a little simpler on the other side, on the system that's getting the data, I added a filter to it. So if we take a look at this, basically what I've done is I've added a where clause, so you can pass in a text. So it's a text property that you can pass in, and and then I put that into the read all questions action. And so this is a basic SQL where clause. It doesn't include the word where. So, and I put that in the where did I put that? I put that here, so that when you're looking at the API in the, when you look at the details, it tells you this, that do not include the word where. And so this is one of the features of the get all questions, and we're going to see this this get all read all entity. We're going to see this again when we get over to the other site and look at the workflow to get the data. But basically, I can pass in a where clause here. Okay, and so we're putting out the data, and then the only thing I did here is I changed the content slightly here, so it's just passing the array of questions. That makes life a little bit simpler on the other side as well. So those are the only things I've done here. So now let me go back over to our site where we're getting the data, and the first thing I need to do here is I'm going to go back to configuration and go to tokens. And make sure I'm in the right place here. Okay, so over here, I have a new token namespace called security. And under security, I have two tokens, and I told you at the beginning of the call, this is the only thing I've done to this site before we started, and I put in these two things. So this is the username and password I'm going to use to access the data. And so now I'm going to create a new token in the security namespace, and I'm going to call that get JWT token. It's going to be in the security namespace, and then we're going to do an HTTP request. And to move things along here, I'll just paste this in here. So this is basically the this is the URL for the API that I just showed you that we created on the community website to pass in the username and the password. And so I'm creating a token, and so of course I'm using the tkn params namespace, so that the token knows that this is the data it asks for when you call the token. And we'll add a cache here. We'll do 300 seconds, so that should cache the value for about 5 minutes. So it'll use the same token, and that's perfectly fine, because the lifetime of the token is longer than that anyway. So, but we'll on this site we're going to make the lifetime of that long. Okay, so now that I've done all that, let me go ahead and save and test that. And to test it, I'm going to copy my password token and paste that in here, and copy my user token.
The reason Patrick did the setup is we didn't want to reveal the password and user from the community site.
Yep, exactly. And it's just, it's a nice way to store constant data in the system as well, in case you need to use it somewhere else. Also. Okay, so let me do that, and it worked. So there's my token. So now I can pass this token to the API and be able to access the data. And this token is associated with the, just as a note, and if you watch the video that Dale referenced earlier, you'll learn about this, but this token is associated with the username and password that I'm passing in. So the permissions apply. So if this token, since it's associated, this user doesn't have the correct permissions to access the data, they won't be able to. So that's important to note as well. Okay, so now my next step here is that, so I have my access to get the bearer token. So now I'm going to go and start working on a workflow that we're going to use to get the data. All right, so go to workflows. And so we're going to do a new workflow. Once again, I'm just leave it in the default namespace and categorize it later when we decide to do that. So the first thing I'm going to do is so remember when I was looking at the my customized API on the community site, I had a where clause that I can pass in. So I'm going to pass a where clause into the workflow, and we're going to leave that as text. So that's the only parameter I'm going to have in here. And then for actions, the first thing I'm going to do is do that server request. So I'm going to do a server request. And the API created was questions with filter. This is the copied API. So this is the URL for that. And then the data I need to pass in, I'm going to do a GET request, and I need to pass in the 2 parameters that API needs, and so it needs a row limit. And I'm just defaulting it to 1,000. We're not going to be pulling back that, but I just want to make sure there's plenty of space there. And the where equals the where clause parameter that I am putting into the workflow. Okay, and then the only other thing I need to do here, and this is probably the most important thing, is I need to put the bearer token into the headers for the API call. So the name for that is authorization, and the value we're going to put in here is, so it has to start with bearer, and it has to have a space here, and then the token is what follows that space. And I mean well, there's 2 meanings of the word token here, but the the access token that we saw earlier when I tested this system token here is what needs to follow that space. And so you can see I'm using exactly what we set up. So it's security, and this is the name of the token that we created. And then I'm passing in my username with my with the 2 tokens for my my user name and my password.
So very, very nice. Just at the time that you need the authorization, that token gets evaluated and returns the bearer token. So it's actually doing a call for you and popping it into the header.
Yep. And of course, it's cached. So if the same thing were happening again within a certain amount of time, it would use the cached value. Okay, so then I'm going to put this into a token called QuestionJSON, and we'll save that. And so now the next one I want to do is I'm going to create a list from the JSON that's being returned. So I'm going to choose the create list from JSON action. And here I'm going to pass in the JSON that's being returned from the API. And I'm going to output so the list name is going to be question list. So I'll be able to access the data that's being passed from the API in the question list : and then property syntax. Okay, so we'll save that. And the next one I want to put in here is the I'm going to just inject a contextual token. This is just a setup. So we're going to use the I'll just navigate to it since it's right here. Create update tokens, and this is simply going to be a token that I'm going to use in the next action, and I just need to have it initiated first. So I'll go here, and I'm going to call that QuestionCount, and the initial value is going to be 0. Save that, and then we're going to add in a execute actions. So
now we get to loop through our list.
Yep. For each list entry. And this is going to, of course, access the list name that I just created. And we're going to update the tokens in the initial context so that it's taking that token that I've initiated already, and each iteration is going to keep on updating that same token. Okay, and then all I'm doing here is, once again, I'm going to add the create update token, and it's going to use the same token that I already created, which was QuestionCount. And then here, and for those of you who are not familiar with this, this is a very, very useful core token that we have in PlantinApp. And we're just going to keep on taking that question count that we have and adding one to it for as many questions as we have. Very simple. And this is the do math token. So it takes the existing token and adds one to it for each iteration. And that's it. We'll save that. And so now, what I want to do, this is giving me the total question count that's being returned based on my filter that I passed in. But now what I want to do is I'm going to read existing community stats. So I'm going to go in here and type read all, and I'm going to find read all community stats, which is the action that's created by PlantinApp when the entity was created. And
so we're trying to find out if there is one for today already.
Yeah. And so and once again, I'm going to use, I mentioned earlier, you would see this again. So I'm going to use the where clause option of the read all. And I'm going to say that I want to find the records where the as of date is equal to today's date. And what I've done here is just some simple SQL where you get date returns date and time, but I'm formatting it as just a date. So because our as of property is just a date. And I've put these could actually be variables, but for now I've just put it in here where it's entity equals the questions entity and the statistic equals daily. But we could certainly make these input variables for the workflow as well. But this is just once again getting us a start. I'm going to go ahead and, so we are only aiming to have one record returned. We're only aiming to look at one record here. So we just want to see, does today's record exist already? So I'm going to change the max number of records to 1, just because, not that it has to be, but just because it makes sense to. And for the output token, I'm going to call it stat exists, and we'll save that. So next, I'm going to take the JSON value that is returned, and from the read all community stats, and I'm going to parse it into tokens. And that's just going to be the stat exists, which is the output from the previous action, and we're looking at the JSON. And now we're going to put that into a base token name stat so that we can access the values by using the stat : syntax. Save that like that. And now we're going to do a split. So I'm going to add a split into the workflow here. And
this is dealing with either the stat already exists for that as of date, or it doesn't exist. And what do we do differently?
Yep. So we're going to create a new community stat. And that's going to pull in, once again, these are, I could have these as variables. I don't right now, but they could be variables in the future. We're going to take that total question count that we got before, and we're going to set the as of to date time now, and we'll do an output token called stat ID, and save that. Now we're going to add another action to the split, and that'll automatically drop down for us here. And this one is going to be partially update. So we're going to partially update a community stat. And for there, we got to pass in the stat ID. So, and we'll clarify the logic here for which one of these runs. But if we did find one, then we want to update that one as opposed to creating a new one. And here, I just want to update the value, and the property value is going to be the QuestionCount token that we created earlier in the workflow. All right.
So to clarify, stat:0:ID, stat is an array of information passed back from that read all.
Yes.
So we have to pick the 0th element, the first element, and grab its ID so that we can access what ID came back.
Even though, and it says this, even though we're only returning one, we still need to specify that we're looking at at the first one. Yep. So save that, and now I need to make sure that I have my conditions set here correctly. So I'm going to so if the ID of the 0, so if there, and this is, if there's nothing there, then we're going to create a new one, and then here, if there is something there, then we're going to do a partial update. Very simple logic here. So if the ID is not there, we create a new one. If it is there, then we're doing a partial update. Cool. All right. So then what I need to do is here, I'm going to do a merge. And I'm going to take this and merge it back here like that. And of course, the most important thing is put an end event on here. So we've had our split logic here. We're merging back, and we're ending the workflow. Okay, so now let's go to output, and I just want to put a I'm just going to put stat ID in here as an output. And we will put that value in here that we just mentioned. And just for fun, I'm going to put the JSON that's returned as well.
So this is more of debugging, wouldn't necessarily be needed for the.
Yeah, right, exactly. This is not something that's needed, but we're going to just put it in here just so we can, when we run a test in a minute, we can see that. So, all right. Let's save and test this workflow. Hope all goes well. We're going to call this get question stats. Save that. And I'm going to get the where clause. I'll explain the where clause here. So all my where clause here is saying that basically we're looking for values from the questions entity where the created date, and I'm formatting it as a date so that we can get everything from today. So, and then I'm formatting a get date as a date. So if it was created today, then we're looking for date equals date. And let's take a run there. And we have a record here, and it's called "This is a test" because I created it earlier today. And
this is the information that came back from our community site. You could go out and look on the community and see it. Yep,
absolutely. Cool. So we have our workflow, and get close on time here, but I think we can do this. So now the workflow is in place, and so what I want to do is just create a task in automation. So I'm going to go to automation, and we're going to do a new job, and I'm going to call it get and update community questions. And I'm going to just specify one as the context user, and we're going to add a a time-based trigger, and we're going to repeat on interval. So I'm going to make this repeat once a minute. This is not how we'll do this ultimately, but I'm doing it now just to just for just for demonstration purposes, right? Exactly. I'm going to choose to skip if running, and on misfire, I'm going to go ahead and have it fire. And then for actions, we're going to simply run the workflow we just created. So
this will every minute go out and get information off the community portal and dump it into the our community stats.
And I'm going to use that where clause that you just saw. And we don't need to, these were just for our testing purposes when running the workflow, so I don't need to output these, so I'm not going to here. And that is the automation task that we need to create. Save that. And I'm going to go ahead and run it. So now it was successful. So based on that, earlier when we ran this, the daily was 4, and you can see that the dashboard, because I put in refresh intervals in, has already updated, and somebody added 1. Was that you, Dale?
Not me.
No? Okay. Somebody added 1. So we have 2. So if I refresh this now, you can see that the questions daily here has been updated to 2. Yeah.
That grid could be updated to dynamically update on the same schedule.
Yes, and could certainly do that. Yeah, we could have this be updating on the same schedule as well. So just a few additional thoughts here. So certainly I could pre-fill real data here. So we could do a little bit of upfront work to pre-fill real data here. But what we're headed towards is to go from, is to start collecting this data now, so that eventually one of the things that we're going to move towards is creating charts to show the flow of data over time. And absolutely, there are this is just a base structure, so there's lots of other data we could collect here and show tiles for. One of the things that in case I ran out of time, it was silly to think that I would, but one of the things I was planning on doing is basically implementing this the same thing for feature requests, because we have the infrastructure in place now. So now I could go and build this out for feature requests relatively quickly. So yeah, great.
So good deal. So just to summarize, we took the idea of grabbing some key statistics from our source system, which is community. We've made a place to keep them. We're not repeating all the data, but we're keeping the data points that we need in the community stats listing. And then we're starting to show dashboard tiles. So yep, I think that was a really good start. And next week I'll be back with how to do, hopefully I'll be able to demonstrate adding chart.js to this so that we can show statistics as more of a line chart or a graph as over time. So
yeah, we could pull this dashboard off onto another page. We don't necessarily have to have the grid data here. The dashboard can just be on the page by itself as we get more and more tiles and charts.
Great.
Great. I really appreciate seeing this done on 120. So this is, I think, maybe the first live examples of building something with 120. And I guess one important thing that maybe we'll touch on next week is why we decided to do a new system rather than build it in the community portal, right? I think that is a question that, at least for me, I mean, I kind of know the answer, but I think for everyone to understand our line of thinking, why not just build it in the community portal, right? Cool.
Absolutely. So it sounds like a cliffhanger. People have to come back.
Yes. So now we'll have a good, strong reason to be here next week on Wednesday at the same time, when they will continue building more custom charts. Cool. Thanks everyone for joining. Thanks Dale and Patrick for putting this in place. And see you all next week.
Very good.
Bye.